Welcome back to the Viper Miner channel. Today, I want to do a quick video on how I isolate my mining rigs and my nodes from the rest of my home network. Okay, I got a request a couple days ago. I promised a guy I'd do it over the weekend, and unfortunately, life got in the way here with my family, so I'm doing it now. Better late than never, I guess. Now, my situation here is a little bit unique compared to others that will be watching this video. I have two ISPs. I have a broadband ISP, which is roughly 200 by 10. That's 200 megabits down. So anything that you're viewing on the internet, and then 10 megabits up. So anything like pushing up. So like if you're uploading a file or uploading your password in an email, sending an email, that would be at the 10 megabit rate. And then I have a second ISP, which is a fiber connection, which is 1 gigabyte up and 1 gigabyte down. Okay, so what happens is I have the same speed going back and forth, whether I'm pulling something off the internet or pushing something up onto the internet. That's a little bit unique. Most people only have one ISP. I went ahead and I drew this out on Visio, trying to keep it generic enough, but give you guys enough information. For the last thing I want to do is get hacked. Okay. If you have one ISP, which is going to be most of you guys out there, this section that's on the right hand side of this yellow firewall called VPN is going to be just duplicated all on this side, on the left hand side. Okay, so let me explain. On my current setup, the ISP, which is my broadband, is coming into my firewall, and it goes to a switch then. Now, let's talk real quick about a firewall. I think everybody should have and own their own firewall. Do not rely on a firewall that's software on your computer. That's only down to a certain layer, and you can get underneath that firewall and then do a lot of damage. You want a hardware firewall. Okay, there's some inexpensive ones out there. Netgear is a really good brand, not sponsored by them, but I started out using Netgear. I now use Ubiquiti, which is very advanced compared to Netgear and everybody else. I have multiple switches here. You'll see that I'm showing you one, but they just kind of, the only reason I have switches is either length of cable and or different areas in the house that needs to have its own connection, more connections, instead of having to run tons of wires back to a central location. I only have one wire going to a switch and then to the next switch. There's a little bit of latency, but today's technology, that latency is very minimal. Okay. And then off that switch, and really, you can do this off a smart switch where you can set up your VLANs on the switch. I do, and I'm going to talk you through how I do this. Now, the problem is that there are so many different switches out there and so many different firewalls, and it's going to be difficult for me to show you every single one. So I'm going to tell you pretty much what the terminology is that's generic, that you'll be able to find out what your firewall and switch uses to get the job done. Okay. I set up all my VLANs, and that's a virtual LAN is what that stands for. Okay. So your local area network is LAN, and the V is for virtual. So my virtual local area network, that's essentially making and carving out on one ISP multiple networks within that firewall or that switch that can be seen by others or totally isolated. If a hacker gets in here, it'll be very difficult for them to get over here. Hopefully your intrusion software would see that and then alert you. But what happens is you're isolating everything. So you need to figure out how you're going to do this. Okay. I have all my VLANs defined in my firewall. It gives me a little bit more control. And what happens is I set up rules that says this VLAN is going to be like your local addresses sometimes. I think a lot of the switches and firewalls start out with a default as 192.168.1.1. That's usually typically the firewall. I highly recommend not using 192.168.1. Change that one to something else, 10, 20, 50, 100. You get it, you can go, oh, excuse me, all the way up to 255. Now, what I would do then is, so what I do is I set all my firewall VLANs there, or all my LANs in my firewall. Okay, so for instance, this VLAN 192.168.10.1, and then every computer that's in this VLAN, so this, in this case, it would be my rigs, would be 192.168.10.2.3.4, and you get the idea, okay? So these cannot see the rigs that are on Windows-based machines, and the Windows-based machines can't see the rigs here because their communication is through the switch, and then the switch is getting information from the firewall to say, oh, that's a VLAN. So they're just passing that information back to the firewall. Now, if you get a smart switch, which I do, I then turn around for added safety. I take the port on whatever cable that this cable gets connected, and this port that it connects into, I program that port to only accept information from that VLAN. So that VLAN, that port would be a 192.168.10 something. And if you're using DHCP, you give it a range. Then the Windows rigs are on VLAN too. So this might be 192.168.20.123, whatever, you know, wherever you get your DHCP, and then how many computers you have in that, or devices. And that would go into VLAN 2 and up. And then in my case, I use a smart switch. So that port then that's connected to only responds to network traffic that is on VLAN 2. And then it gets passed to the firewall and back out. Now, at the firewall here, I also use that something called NAT. Okay. That basically takes all my network traffic and translates it back to one ISP. If you only have one static IP address connected to your modem, and you don't have a static IP or multiple static IPs, then it's already in NAT 99% of the time, so you don't have to worry about anything there. That's why I didn't really draw it. And then my ASICs are on VLAN 3, so that'd be like 192.168.30. And then whatever. And again, the port here would be its own VLAN listening for only that traffic. And then it would go to the firewall and back out. Now, all this doesn't see each other. Only within, so if the purple box, only those computers within that purple box. Only the computers or devices, rigs, whatever these are going to see this in the cyan bluish color. And then the ASICs in this case would be in the yellow. That's the only devices that can see each other. So if a hacker were to get in here, yes, they'll be able to see my other devices, and they can take control over those and go from there. Now, I haven't done this, but you could do this. You could add each of your rigs, each of your ASICs on its own VLAN. That would then isolate that even further to allow, if somebody were to get in there, they cannot see anything else. Then they only can see that rig or that ASIC. You could do that. That's like, I mean, you want to have really good security. The problem with that is that management is a nightmare at that point. Okay, because if I wanted to look at each ASIC, I'd have to change VPNs. I'd have to change my VLAN each time. Okay. Now, if you don't have a second ISP, then your home network would slide. So you just take this, and it would be underneath the ASICs and its own VLAN at that point. Okay. You can have as many VLANs as you want for the most part. Some manufacturers will limit what you can do for a VLAN, how many you can have, but I have never hit a limit on, from a home standpoint, I have never hit a limit on a VLAN. Okay. And then one of the other things that I would suggest doing is you see this on this side here. I got IoT. This is Internet of Things. So this is your smart switches, your Echo, your Amazon devices, your Google devices, your Apple devices that are like smart devices. So even your like your thermostat, everything else, I put that on its own separate VLAN. And I isolate that completely away from the rest of my network. Now, in my scenario, I have a second IP address here for my internet. I have my second ISP, goes to the firewall, goes to a switch. Now, everything from this point forward is the same. This switch is a smart switch, and each of these ports that so I did a video and I'll drop it in the link or I'll put a card up here that all my core wallets are on virtual machines. Each core wallet is a separate virtual machine for safety and hacking purposes because core wallets are very vulnerable, especially for the bad apples. Unfortunately, they're just there. So what I did is I put each core wallet on its own virtual machine. It's a very small virtual machine. It's all Windows based for the most part. I can sync the wallet. I sync the wallets on popular ones that I'm using every so often. You do not have to have a synced core wallet to get a receiving or sending address. That's easy to do. You can just boot it up, get that, and be done with it. Then I have my nodes now are on my ISP2, which is my fiber connection, because it needs that 10 or actually 25 megabits up for flux. Okay. I can't do that on this side because this is only 10. So I have my nodes sitting on my ISP that has 1 gigabyte by 1 gigabyte, but its own separate VLAN. And then I have my home network, and my home network is on another VLAN. Again, this switch only talks to this VLAN. Okay. And you'll notice the Wi-Fi out here above my head here is only connected to VLAN 3. Okay. This Wi-Fi, so if you were to get into my Wi-Fi, you can only see what's ever on my home network. Okay. You can't see my nodes. You can't see my core wallets. You can't see my Internet of Things. Actually, there is a Wi-Fi box, which I did not draw because a lot of your Internet of Things, a lot of your devices are wireless. So there is a um, a separate wireless device here for those devices. You're going to say, Viper, how do I manage everything if my home computer is sitting over here? How do I see this? And that's where this VPN comes in. So I have a VPN. I have my firewall smart enough that they can actually talk via this VPN through this switch, and they go and they talk via VPN, which connection. Okay. Now remember, this is all gigabyte. This is all gigabyte. The slowness in which why you can't run a Flux node on my broadband is because this is where the 200 by 10 is. Okay. This is where my gigabyte speed is. This is all gigabyte. Everything internally is gigabyte, or depending on what your slowest device is from a switch / firewall standpoint. So if you put one switch in there that's servicing multiple things at 100 megabit and you have everything else as a gigabit, you will slow down any connection that has to go through that router or that switch down to 100. So all my switches are gigabyte, and really anything I buy now is 10 gigabyte or higher on my port speeds. So I will VPN into the switch, and then depending on which VPN I use, and I have 3 different VPNs that would then connect into either the rigged HIVEOS if I needed to go do maintenance over here. I needed a direct connect into the HIVEOS systems, but mostly I manage my HIVEOS through HIVEOS. I could be on any network, right? You just use a browser and you go into it, and I can then Hive shell into the device and have complete control over the device at that point. So I really don't use the VPN to get into here. I do it every so often, just for the fact that if I'm looking for a device, if I put a device out here that needs an IP address that's not really on HIVEOS yet, or I'm doing some really unique stuff to something, I will then VPN over here. It's there because when I set up everything else, I just did it. But in order to manage my Windows rigs, I can either go onto that device, which they're all headless, so I have to log into them. So I would then VPN into the switch that would allow me to get access to the VPN, the VLAN number 2 in this case, and then I would be able to see each of these rigs, all these Windows rigs, and then be able to manage those at that point. And the same goes for my ASICs. With the HIVEOS, where you can do most of your ASICs on the Hive Hub, and I'll do a video pretty soon about that. I got another L++ in, so I'm going to be doing a video on that as well. You can manage most of it off of the ASIC hub, but if you have a mini Doge or anything else like that, a mini box miner, any of the Gold Shell box miners, you need that IP address in order to log into it, and you're gonna need the browser to do that. Even if you get a brand new ASIC in that's an Antminer SJ9, you're still gonna need that IP address and be able to browse into that locally into that device in order to get everything set up. So you'll need the VPN connection over to here. Why do I not just take a cable and connect from this switch to this switch? Whenever I want to go do that, I can, but I don't know if there's something malice over on this side before I get in there. And if I were to put a cable here to here, I would then expose this switch to what's over here. The idea is to keep this totally separate, okay? Not only that, but now I have 2 separate ISPs coming in, and you would have to start putting a lot of rules across everything to which traffic is going to go to this IP and then which traffic is going to this IP for the ISPs. I do it this way, and this is how I have it set up. I find it works best for me this way. If you are not comfortable with VLANs, there's some really good tutorial videos out there, but whatever switch and or firewall that you're going to use, typically out on their website, on that manufacturer's website, they will have a section about how to set up a VLAN, okay? You do not need to switch here. So if I were to buy a firewall that had, say, 8 ports on it, and they're out there because I used to have a Netgear firewall that had 8 ports on it. It had 4 LAN ports or WAN ports, and then 8 LAN ports. And depending on how big your network is and what you were going to do, you literally could just take, if I just had these 6 computers or rigs, I could just plug them right into the firewall and bypass this, and do this. Now, I will caution anybody that is doing their firewall and poking additional holes in it to satisfy certain different VLANs and or programs within some of these. So for instance, the flex nodes, you need to open up the firewall for certain things, right? You're now allowing outside access in. I have what's called intrusion detection also on my firewall. That's one reason why I use Ubiquiti. Ubiquiti has intrusion detection, so anything that looks like it shouldn't be there, it sends me an alert immediately so I can go investigate. I'll give you a quick story on why that's so important. My wife, who never used TikTok, one of her nurse friends says, "Oh, you gotta look at this video. It's so funny, so funny." She loaded TikTok at work. She brought it home. She wanted to show me the video. All of a sudden, I had every alert. I had ping, ping, ping alerts going. And what had happened is TikTok tries to scan your network and grab personal information. Okay. It took me forever to get down on my network. So in my household, TikTok is banned. There is no TikTok, period. This is a little bit helpful. I'm sorry, it's a little generic, but I have to have my safety as well involved to make sure that there is no bad apples out there trying to get hold of my IP addresses and or how they can defend, or how I'm defending and how they can enter. There are some additional protocols I have in here and additional devices I have in here from a pure protection standpoint. They really kind of go beyond what a home user would do. I have this because I run two businesses out of my house, and I also do a lot of financial hedge fund stuff. All that is not on this. You can't see this on here, and it's protected in a whole nother way. But this is a basic way on how I do that. Okay, guys. If you have questions about this, leave comments. I'll try to answer them in the comments as best as I can. If you only have one ISP, this is going to be not there. And all this would be moved over to here. Okay? So this way you can have it all underneath one firewall protecting yourself. I will talk to you guys soon. Teaser, I just got another Antminer L3++ in. So I'm going to be bringing that online, doing a firmware upgrade into the HIVEOS system. I did that for my other ones, and I realized I probably should have did that a video for people that know how to do that. So I will do that as well. And then we'll also talk about, just how well the L3 Plus is doing. Today is, for reference, January 12th. Markets are moving higher. Bitcoin's over 17, which is really nice. And I think even Ether is above 4. Catch you guys in the next video. Be safe, be profitable. God bless you all.